What if every solar eclipse is a moment when something beyond our world looks directly at us? Pi. In 1991, during a total solar eclipse visible across Hawaii, Mexico, and parts of South America, something unprecedented happened. NASA and multiple international observatories recorded it, though they've never fully explained it. Dr. Maria Santos was leading an eclipse observation team in La Paz, Mexico. She'd witnessed dozens of eclipses in her career as a solar physicist. She knew what to expect: the temperature drop, the eerie silence, the spectacular corona. What she didn't expect was what she later described as the most unsettling experience of my scientific career. As totality began, her instruments started picking up anomalous electromagnetic readings. Not solar radiation, this was something else entirely. The readings formed patterns, almost like pulses. But here's the thing: the pulses weren't random. They were synchronized across multiple observation points, hundreds of miles apart. It was like, Dr. Santos later wrote in her private journal, like something was scanning, moving from location to location, observing each group of observers in turn. The official report simply noted unexplained electromagnetic anomalies during totality. But Dr. Santos's personal account, which only came to light after her retirement, painted a different picture. She described feeling intensely observed during those 2 minutes of totality. Not just the natural human response to a cosmic event, but something far more specific. She said it felt like being in a museum exhibit, fascinating to look at, but aware that you're also being studied by unseen visitors. 3 days after the eclipse, Dr. Santos received a letter at her home address which was unlisted and known only to family. The envelope had no return address, no postmark. Inside was a single photograph, the eclipse team she'd been leading, taken from an impossible angle, high above, as if photographed from the sky itself. She never went public with the photograph. When asked about it years later, she would only say, "Some experiences are too important to risk being dismissed as fiction." Now, let's talk about August 21st, 2017, the Great American Eclipse, the first total solar eclipse to cross the entire United States from coast to coast in nearly a century. 14 states experienced totality. An estimated 215 million American adults watched it, making it arguably the most observed natural phenomenon in human history. And the reports that came out afterward, well, they're harder to dismiss when they're coming from millions of people. The National UFO Reporting Center. Yes, that's a real organization. And yes, NASA occasionally reviews their data, logged over 1,200 unusual sighting reports, specifically during the 2-week period surrounding the eclipse. But these weren't your typical flying saucer stories. People across the path of totality reported the same sensation, Doctor. But more than that, they reported seeing things that shouldn't have been visible during an eclipse. In Hopkinsville, Kentucky, right in the heart of the path of totality, over 300 people independently reported seeing geometric patterns in the corona that didn't match any known solar phenomena. These weren't random observations from untrained eyes. The reports came from amateur astronomers, photographers, and even a few professional meteorologists who traveled to witness the eclipse. The patterns were described consistently: angular, almost crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with their own light within the sun's corona. They were only visible for seconds at a time, and strangely, they didn't appear in photographs. only human eyes could see them. Jennifer Walsh, a high school physics teacher from Illinois, had traveled to Kentucky specifically to photograph the eclipse. She had professional equipment, multiple cameras, and had practiced the timing for months. Her photographs of the eclipse are stunning and completely normal. They show exactly what you'd expect to see: the moon's silhouette surrounded by the sun's corona. But what she saw with her naked eyes was different. There were structures in the corona. She told me in an interview last year. Geometric, impossible structures that seemed to shift and change, and I had the strangest feeling that they were observing us. Like we were being cataloged somehow. When I asked her why she thought the structures didn't appear in her photographs, she paused for a long time. "Maybe," she said, "they didn't want to be photographed. Maybe they were only meant to be seen by human consciousness, not recorded by machines." Here's where things get really interesting. After the 2017 eclipse, a retired NASA communications specialist named Robert Chen began analyzing the timing of major UFO sightings and unexplained phenomena reports over the past century. What he found was startling. Spikes in unusual activity, not just UFO sightings, but all kinds of anomalous reports: time distortions, electromagnetic anomalies. Even mass synchronicities occurred with remarkable consistency in the 48-hour windows surrounding total solar eclipses. Chen mapped this data going back to 1900, and the correlation was undeniable. It wasn't just confirmation bias or increased attention during eclipse events. The statistical significance was overwhelming. It's as if, Chen wrote in his unpublished analysis, eclipses create windows, moments when the normal barriers between our reality and something else become permeable. But Chen discovered something even more unsettling. The effect was getting stronger. Eclipse-related anomalies from the early 1900s were sparse and localized. By the 1950 seconds, they were more frequent and widespread. The 1991 eclipse marked a significant jump in both the number and intensity of reports. And 2017? The data suggests it was off the charts. Chen's theory was that they, whoever or whatever might be observing us during eclipses, were becoming more active, more interested, or perhaps more desperate to make contact. His final report, completed just weeks before his death in 2019, ended with a chilling prediction. If the pattern holds, the next major eclipse visible from a populated area will likely produce unprecedented levels of contact attempts. We may finally have our answer about what's been watching us all along. The next total solar eclipse, visible from a heavily populated area, April 8th, 2024, crossing Mexico, the United States, and Canada. I'll be honest with you, as I was researching this episode, the 2024 eclipse kept coming up. And what happened during that eclipse? Well, it's still being analyzed, but the preliminary reports are unlike anything we've seen before. The eclipse crossed 15 U.S. states, with over 31 million people in the path of totality. The sheer scale of observation was unprecedented, but so was what people observed. In Dallas, Texas, during the 4 minutes and 20 seconds of totality, multiple amateur radio operators reported receiving structured signals on frequencies that should have been impossible during an eclipse. The signals weren't random static or atmospheric interference. They were organized, sequential, almost like communication attempts. Sarah Martinez, a ham radio operator with 30 years of experience, was part of a group monitoring radioactivity during the eclipse. At first, we thought it might be some kind of atmospheric reflection, she told a local news station. But the signals were too clean, too organized, and they seemed to be responding to our transmissions. The group had been broadcasting standard eclipse observation reports to other operators across the country. But during totality, their broadcasts started being echoed back to them, not as simple reflections, but as modified versions. Words were rearranged, technical terms were replaced with more precise alternatives, and in some cases, entirely new information was added. It was like, Sarah said, like someone was correcting our homework. But the radio anomalies were just the beginning. In upstate New York, the town of Plattsburgh experienced something that emergency services are still struggling to explain. During the 3.5 minutes of totality, every electronic device in a 6-block radius shut down simultaneously. Cars, phones, digital cameras, even battery-powered devices, everything just stopped. But here's the strange part. People reported feeling more alert, more conscious during those minutes than they'd ever felt in their lives. It wasn't frightening. It was clarifying, as if the absence of electronic interference allowed them to perceive something that was always there, but usually drowned out by the noise of modern life. When the eclipse ended and the devices came back online, many people found new files on their phones, files they hadn't created. Simple text documents with single phrases. "We see you too." The shadow dance continues. "When next the alignment comes, be ready." Local authorities initially suspected a coordinated prank, but the files appeared on devices that weren't connected to any network, and the timestamps showed they were created during the exact moments when the devices were completely non-functional. Now, let me share something that might be the key to understanding all of this. Astronomers measure eclipse patterns using something called the Saros cycle, roughly 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours between similar eclipses. It's a natural consequence of the complex orbital mechanics between Earth, the Moon, and the Sunday. But here's what's fascinating. If you map the major contact events, the strongest reports of anomalous activity during eclipses, they don't follow our calendar years. They follow the Saros cycle almost perfectly. Every 18 years, the same type of reports surface. The same descriptions of being watched, of seeing impossible structures in the corona, of receiving unexplained communications. It's as if whatever is observing us during eclipses operates on its own timeline, following the natural rhythms of celestial mechanics rather than human civilization. Dr. Amelia Foster, an astronomer at the University of Colorado, has been quietly tracking this pattern for over 2 decades. She's never published her findings in peer-reviewed journals, Career Suicide. She calls it, but her data is compelling. "The consistency is what convinced me something real is happening," she told me during a phone interview. The same phenomena, described in almost identical terms by people who couldn't possibly have coordinated their stories, and always tied to the Saros cycle. Dr. Foster's research suggests that eclipses might be more than just interesting astronomical events. They might be scheduled appointments, regular moments when something vast and intelligent aligns its attention with our world. "Think about it," she said. "If you were an intelligence observing a planet, wouldn't you want to do it during the most predictable, regularly occurring event v. The Aboriginal Australians have Dreamtime stories about the Sun Woman hiding her face so the star ancestors can look upon the Earth without being blinded by her light. And then there's this. The Hopi Prophecies SP. A physics student in Ohio described suddenly grasping unified field theory in a way that made perfect sense during the eclipse, though she couldn't fully retain or explain the understanding afterward. These reports are almost impossible to verify, of course, but they're also almost impossible to fake. The people sharing these experiences aren't seeking fame or attention. Most of them seem genuinely puzzled by what happened to them. Dr. Foster has developed what she calls the contact protocol theory. She believes that eclipses might be part of a deliberate, long-term observation and communication program conducted by an intelligence that understands human psychology better than we understand ourselves. Think about it from their perspective, she explained. If you wanted to study a species without causing panic or disrupting their natural development, you'd choose moments when they're already primed to accept unusual experiences. During an eclipse, humans expect to see something extraordinary. Their minds are open, receptive. They're already looking up. The theory suggests that this intelligence has been conducting a gradual introduction program over centuries, starting with simple observation, just watching us during eclipses, then moving to more direct but subtle interactions, the geometric patterns in the corona that only human eyes can see, the electromagnetic anomalies, the synchronized radio signals, and now, possibly, direct information transfer, testing our readiness for more significant contact. The pattern suggests patience, Doctor, Foster said. Incredible patience. Whoever or whatever this is, they're willing to work on generational timescales. They're not in a hurry. They're waiting for us to be ready. But ready for what? There's another angle to consider here, one that bridges the gap between the scientific and the mystical. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, wrote extensively about the collective unconscious, the idea that all human minds are connected at some deep level, sharing archetypal knowledge and experiences. Jung was fascinated by eclipse mythology and spent years collecting eclipse-related stories from cultures around the world. He noticed the same patterns we've been discussing, the consistent theme of being watched, of contact with otherworldly intelligence, of eclipses as doorways between realities. But Jung proposed something interesting. What if eclipses don't just allow something external to observe us? What if they allow us to observe something about ourselves that's normally hidden? The theory goes like this. Eclipses represent perfect moments of cosmic alignment, when the usually chaotic influences of solar radiation are temporarily blocked, allowing human consciousness to function at a higher level of sensitivity and interconnectedness. During totality, when the electromagnetic noise from the sun is silenced, human minds might naturally synchronize in ways that are usually impossible. We might access layers of awareness that are normally drowned out by the constant barrage of solar energy hitting our planet. This could explain why so many people report receiving information or inspiration during eclipses, why the experiences seem so consistent across cultures and time periods, and why the phenomena don't always register on our instruments. What if the watchers aren't external beings at all, but aspects of our own collective consciousness that only become visible when the cosmic conditions are just right? It's a compelling theory, but it doesn't fully explain some of the physical evidence, the radio signals, the electromagnetic anomalies, the photographs that appear on devices that were turned off. Unless, of course, consciousness has physical effects we don't yet understand. unless the boundary between mind and matter is less solid than we've assumed. Here's what keeps me awake at night. If Dr. Chen was right about the escalating pattern, if Dr. Foster's contact protocol theory is accurate, then we're building towards something significant. The next major eclipse visible from populated areas will be on August 12, 2045, crossing the United States from California to Florida. But before that, there are smaller opportunities. Eclipses visible from parts of Europe, Asia, and Australia over the next 2 decades. If the pattern holds, each eclipse should bring stronger phenomena, more direct contact attempts, more people receiving those mysterious downloads of information and inspiration. But there's something else to consider. Our world is more connected now than it's ever been. During the 2024 eclipse, millions of people were sharing their experiences in real time through social media, creating an unprecedented global conversation about what was happening. If something is trying to make contact with humanity during eclipses, it now has access to a communication network that spans the entire planet. For the first time in history, eclipse experiences can be shared and compared instantly across cultures and continents. This could accelerate whatever process has been unfolding over the centuries. Instead of isolated groups of observers having unexplained experiences, we now have the potential for coordinated, global eclipse events. Imagine millions of people around the world, all focusing their attention on the same celestial phenomenon at the same time, all sharing their experiences instantaneously. If consciousness has any kind of collective power, if human attention can actually influence reality in ways we don't understand, then coordinated eclipse observations might represent the most powerful focusing of human awareness in our species' history. And if something has been waiting for us to reach that level of coordination, that level of global consciousness, well, the 2045 eclipse might be more than just another astronomic. I've always been fascinated by astronomy, but I used to view eclipses as purely mechanical events. Predictable intersections of orbital paths, beautiful, but ultimately just physics in action. Now I'm not so sure. The sheer consistency of the reports across cultures and centuries is hard to dismiss. The escalating nature of the phenomena over the past century is even harder to explain. And the personal accounts I've collected while researching this episode, well, they've come from serious, credible people who have nothing to gain by sharing these experiences. Dr. Santos, the solar physicist from Mexico, told me something during our interview that I can't get out of my head. She said, "For 30 years, I studied the sun as if it were just a ball of burning gas. But during that eclipse in 1991, I realized I was looking at something alive. Not alive in the biological sense, but alive in a way that includes intelligence, purpose, awareness. The sun isn't just a star," she continued. "It's the focal point of something much larger. And eclipses are when that larger intelligence can look back at us without being blinded by its own light." I asked her if she believed in extraterrestrial intelligence, if she thought we were being visited by beings from other worlds. She laughed and said, "I think we're being visited by intelligence, yes, but maybe not from other worlds. Maybe from other levels of reality that intersect with ours during these precise celestial alignments. Maybe the question isn't who is watching us, but what layer of existence becomes visible when the cosmic conditions are just right." This brings me to a thought that's been haunting me as I've delved deeper into this mystery. What if eclipses have always been appointment times, But we've only recently developed the technology and global communication networks necessary to recognize the pattern. Throughout history, eclipse experiences were isolated events. A village here, a city there, maybe an entire region, if the eclipse path was wide enough. But each group of observers was essentially alone with their experience. No way to compare notes with others, no way to confirm whether what they witnessed was unique or part of a larger pattern. Now, for the first time in human history, we can collect and analyze eclipse experiences on a global scale. We can see the patterns that were always there, but never visible to any individual group of observers. And if that's true, if eclipses have always been scheduled moments of contact or observation, then we're not just now being visited by something otherworldly. We're now, for the first time, becoming aware that we've always been visited. The implications are staggering. It suggests that human consciousness might be part of a much larger system of awareness, one that operates on cosmic timescales and uses celestial events as synchronization points. It suggests that we're not alone, and never have been. But more than that, it suggests that whatever intelligence has been observing us has been incredibly patient, waiting not just for our technology to advance, but for our global consciousness to develop to the point where we could recognize and respond to contact attempts. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not suggesting we abandon scientific rigor or critical thinking. The beauty of this mystery is that it exists right at the intersection of documented scientific phenomena and unexplained experiences. The electromagnetic anomalies during eclipses are real and measurable. The radio signals are being recorded by professional equipment. The consistent reports across cultures and centuries are documented historical facts. But the interpretation of these phenomena, whether they represent natural but poorly understood aspects of eclipse physics or something far more extraordinary, that's where the mystery lies. Science works best when it acknowledges the limits of current understanding while remaining open to new possibilities. The history of scientific progress is the history of phenomena that were once mysterious, becoming understood through careful observation and analysis. Maybe eclipse anomalies will eventually be explained by advances in our understanding of electromagnetic fields, consciousness, or the complex interactions between celestial bodies. Maybe there's a perfectly natural explanation for why so many people report feeling watched during totality, or why geometric patterns appear in the corona that don't show up in photographs. But maybe not. Maybe some mysteries are meant to remain mysterious, not because they can't be understood, but because they're part of something so much larger than our current paradigms that understanding them would require us to fundamentally reimagine what reality island. Here's something that struck me while interviewing people who've had unusual eclipse experiences. None of them seemed crazy. They weren't conspiracy theorists or people prone to wild imaginings. They were teachers, engineers, scientists, photographers, or practical people who approached the eclipse with normal expectations and came away with extraordinary stories. And almost all of them shared a common reluctance to discuss their experiences publicly. Not because they doubted what happened to them, but because they knew how it would sound to others. Jennifer Walsh, the physics teacher from Illinois, put it perfectly. I know what I saw during that eclipse. I know what I felt. But I also know that if I hadn't experienced it myself, I'd probably be skeptical of anyone telling me the same story. That reluctance to speak. If these eclipse phenomena are real, If they're part of some larger pattern of contact or observation, then the social stigma around discussing them might be serving as a natural filter, ensuring that only the most compelling experiences get reported. But it also means we might be missing a lot of data. How many people have had unusual eclipse experiences but never shared them with anyone? How many subtle contact events go unreported because people don't want to be labeled as eccentric or delusional? The anonymous nature of internet reporting has changed this somewhat. People are more willing to share strange experiences when they can do so without attaching their real names. But even then, the deeply personal nature of many eclipse experiences makes them difficult to communicate effectively. How do you describe the feeling of being observed by something vast and intelligent? How do you explain receiving information directly into your consciousness? How do you convey the sense that you've briefly touched something infinitely larger than human understanding? These experiences resist ordinary language. They exist in the realm of the ineffable, which makes them almost impossible to study using traditional scientific methods. Dr. Foster has another theory that I find particularly intriguing. She calls it the cultural preparation hypothesis. The idea is that the gradual escalation of eclipse phenomena over the past century isn't random. It's a deliberate preparation process, designed to slowly acclimate human culture to the reality of non-human intelligence. Think about how our cultural narratives around extraterrestrial contact have evolved, she explained. A century ago, the idea of visitors from space was purely fiction. 50 years ago, it was the stuff of B-movies and fringe theories. Today, even mainstream scientists and government officials are acknowledging the possibility of non-human intelligence. This cultural shift might not be accidental. If an intelligence has been conducting a long-term observation program, it would make sense for them to gradually introduce concepts that would help humanity process the reality of contact when it finally occurs. The escalating eclipse phenomena fit this pattern perfectly. Starting with vague feelings of being watched, progressing to electromagnetic anomalies and visual phenomena, now moving toward direct information transfer and communication attempts. Each stage pushes the boundaries of what's considered normal or possible, but not so far that it causes panic or complete social disruption. It's a masterclass in gradual disclosure, designed to prepare humanity for something larger, and the timing aligns with our technological development. As our instruments become more sophisticated, the phenomena become more measurable. As our communication networks become more global, the experiences become more coordinated. It's as if whatever intelligence is behind this has been watching our development and calibrating their contact program to match our readiness to handle it. So what comes next? If the patterns we've discussed are real, if the escalation continues, what should we expect from future eclipses? Based on the trajectory of reports over the past century, the next major eclipse events might include more direct communication attempts, more widespread technological interactions, and possibly even visual phenomena that can be captured by cameras and instruments. The 2045 eclipse could be a watershed moment. By then, we'll have had 2 more decades to develop our understanding of consciousness, quantum mechanics, and the nature of reality. We'll have global communication networks that make today's internet look primitive. We'll have millions of people who grew up hearing stories about eclipse anomalies, primed to expect something extraordinary. If something has been waiting for humanity to reach a certain level of technological and cultural readiness, 2045 might be the moment it's been waiting for. But there's another possibility, one that's both exciting and sobering. What if the escalation we've been seeing isn't building toward a single contact event, but toward a permanent change in the relationship between human consciousness and whatever intelligence has been observing us? What if eclipses have been training exercises, gradually expanding our awareness and sensitivity to prepare us for ongoing contact with forms of intelligence that operate on completely different scales and timelines than human consciousness? In that case, the question isn't when first contact will occur, but whether we'll recognize it when it's already happening all around us. This entire topic raises profound questions about the nature of consciousness, intelligence, and reality itself. If the eclipse phenomena are real, if they represent genuine contact with non-human intelligence, then we have to reconsider some of our most fundamental assumptions about our place in the universe. Are we alone? The eclipse evidence suggests we never have been. Is consciousness purely biological? The reports of direct information transfer during eclipses suggest it might be something far more fundamental, a basic property of reality that extends beyond individual brains and nervous systems. Is intelligence always tied to individual entities? The patterns we've discussed hint at forms of awareness that might be collective, distributed across scales of space and time that dwarf human comprehension. These aren't just academic questions. They have practical implications for how we understand ourselves, our purpose, and our potential as a species. If we're part of a larger community of intelligences, what are our responsibilities within that community? If consciousness can operate across scales and dimensions, we're only beginning to recognize what does that mean for human development and evolution. And if eclipses really are appointment times scheduled, moments of contact with something vast and patient, then what should we be doing to prepare for those appointments? As I wrap up this exploration, I want to share something personal. When I started researching this topic, I was looking for an interesting story about unexplained phenomena. What I found was something that's changed how I think about my place in the cosmos. The idea that eclipses might be moments when we're observed by something immensely intelligent and patient that's simultaneously humbling and inspiring. It suggests that human consciousness might be more significant, more connected to the larger patterns of existence than we've ever imagined. It also suggests that we're living through a remarkable time in human history. If the escalation patterns are real, we might be among the first generations of humans to recognize and begin responding to contact attempts that have been happening for millennia. That's both an incredible opportunity and a tremendous responsibility. How we handle this possibility, whether we approach it with wonder or fear, with open minds or closed skepticism, might determine not just our own future, but the future of contact between human and non-human intelligence. The next time you hear about a solar eclipse, I encourage you to pay attention not just to the astronomical event, but to the human responses surrounding it. Look for the patterns we've discussed, the reports of feeling watched, the electromagnetic anomalies, the descriptions of geometric structures in the corona. But more than that, if you have the opportunity to witness a total solar eclipse yourself, approach it with both scientific curiosity and open awareness. Pay attention not just to what you see, but to what you feel, what you sense, what unexpectedly occurs to you during those precious minutes of totality. Document your experience, but also trust it. The most important data about eclipse phenomena might not come from our instruments, but from our consciousness. And remember, if something vast and patient has been watching us during eclipses for thousands of years, if it's been gradually escalating its contact attempts as we develop the capacity to recognize and respond to them, then your personal eclipse experience might be more than just a memorable moment of natural beauty. It might be an appointment you've been scheduled for your entire life. As we reach the end of today's journey into the mystery of eclipse watchers, I'm left with more questions than answers, and I think that's exactly as it should be. The best mysteries aren't the ones that get neatly solved, but the ones that expand our sense of what's possible. Whether eclipses are simply beautiful astronomical events or something far more significant, they remind us that we live in a universe full of wonders we're only beginning to understand. They invite us to look up, to pay attention, to remain open to possibilities that challenge our assumptions about reality. And maybe, just maybe, they remind us that we're not alone. The next major eclipse visible from North America won't occur until 2044, but there are smaller eclipses happening around the world every year or two. If this topic has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to find out when the next eclipse will be visible from your location, and to approach it as more than just a celestial show. Approach it as a potential appointment with the unknown. Thanks for joining me on this exploration of one of the universe's most intriguing mysteries. This has been Javis Heist, where we dive deep into the stories that make you question everything you thought you knew. If today's episode has left you with thoughts, theories, or eclipse experiences of your own, I'd love to hear about them. Drop your comments below, and please, share,